So, good morning, everybody. Yeah, got that recording message. Good morning, everybody. I'm Rebecca Watkin, and I was approached to take on this task of working with you today to look at the grade 4 FSA marking experience. And so I've got a couple of screens open that I'll be sharing with you. I've got a few slides here to just keep us on task. And so this is your welcome and identifier slide. And then I've also got the exemplars and other PDF documents open. So I hope you've all had a chance to download those yourself so that it'll make things a little smoother for us to go back and forth. I've got them open on my desktop, and we'll definitely be taking a look at those. And I can certainly slow down my progress if you need to read from my version. But other than that, we'll just kind of dive right in. We'll just go ahead here, move through my slides. A little bit of an overview agenda. I mean, these times are my best guess. This is my first time working with this kind of hour-and-a-half webinar situation with this particular subject area. So this is just a guide for me mostly to keep me on task and make sure that we end on time, because you've probably got lots of other things going on today. So we'll just start with an introduction. I'll give you a little bit of background information about the FSA. We won't go too much into detail because you've got a lot of written information in your packages that will tell you the background. We'll start with numeracy, and then we'll go into literacy, and there's two themes. So we'll go through the two themes, and I've given us about 25 minutes for numeracy and 35 minutes for literacy. We have a little bit of extra time at the end, which can be our flow space if we need to take from that time. I thought I would start with an introduction. As I said, I'm Rebecca Watkin. I work in the Comox Valley, the traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. And in this image here is the Comox Glacier, also known as Quinish, features in the traditional story of the people from the land of plenty. It's the hero of the flood story of the people in this area. And my house is situated in such a way that I look out over the Beaufort Range here and have this glacier in my view. I'm proud to be on this unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. I have a background in education. I started my teaching in 2002 in BC and roamed around the mainland and then over to the island and was a principal for about 10 years. And now my role is in supporting the BC Waldorf schools. There's 7 schools, and I'm kind of my position is called compliance administrator. I also do inspections for the Ministry of Ed and various other hats I wear, like most of you. We all wear lots of hats. So Janet reached out to me and asked me if I could participate in this. I have had experience marking FSAs in my teaching career. I did both grade 4 and grade 7. So I'm happy to be here with all of you. And we have a small group, so I will be calling on you to have a discussion with me, which sometimes the smaller group makes it a lot of fun because we can have a more dynamic conversation. So a little bit of a background. This information is pulled from the information that you have on your PDFs, and sometimes that admin or even the teaching packages that you get are just so overwhelming. Those PDFs are really long, 140 pages, and there's lots of them. So I just pulled out a few things that I wanted to highlight for you. Namely that holistic. I wanted to kind of like just bring up that word holistic. What does that mean? Because it's mentioned a few times that the marking process should be holistic. And so to me, this means getting kind of an impression of the whole answer, reading the whole answer that a student has written, and focusing on what the student is doing well or can do, some of the highlights, the positives, and in weighting the answer, to not weight any portion of it more so than the other, that it's kind of all weighted the same, all portions the same. And something else in that holistic umbrella is to be aware of our biases. So if you really can't stand messy writing, just be aware of that, because we're not marking for the style of the printing or even spelling. And that as professionals, there's value in your work as a professional. So use your professional judgment as well. So that kind of gives me the overview of what is meant by the word holistic, and it's good to keep in mind. I wanted to mention that this FSA, as you know, is a formative assessment. It doesn't follow the student around, that it's a capture for the province, a formative capture, to see how students are learning in the province, and that the validity is there, that as independent scorers, when we score, it goes to kind of like the master scorers, and our scores are within a 90%, 99% validity. They show that we score 99%, or another way to say it is 1 point off of what they score. So we're right there with the master scorers. And so we can, feel confident that what we're doing is the same as what everybody else is doing in terms of scoring. And then on this slide, I just wanted to give you a little brief reminder that your scores must be submitted by November 24th, which doesn't give you a lot of time, but depends how many you have to score at your school. So we're going to just dive right in, unless there's any questions about the kind of the overview of the purpose of FSA and how we're going to work today. Okay. So we'll dive right in with numeracy, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at it, but for the numeracy portion, there are 3 questions, and there are 3 parts to each question, an A, B, and a C. The rubric high level kind of facets are reason and analyze, understand and solve, communicate and represent. And we're scoring holistically for the line of best fit. And I just thought, well, if I just read those words, line of best fit, I'm not sure I know what that means. So I'll show you my next slide here, which gives the kind of high level keywords from the entire rubric. And scoring for the line of best fit would mean, when we're looking at a rubric and the different aspects of an answer, we might have certain aspects in the 2 column, certain aspects in the 3 column, certain aspects in the 4 column, but the line of best fit would indicate where does most of the work fall, and that line of best fit, or that column of the rubric, is the score that we would give in that case. So this is taken from the rubric, the scoring guide, the PDF called the scoring guide, and it kind of gives this, I find this very, very helpful to give me an overview. So I'm going to keep this slide open, but we'll switch it over to, we're going to start to take a look at the rubrics themselves, or pardon me, at the questions and the exemplars themselves. My way of working is going to be that we'll read the question, and then we'll take a look at the full exemplar from the scoring guide. So we'll be looking at the numeracy package, then going over to the scoring guide to look at the rubric, then back to the exemplars, and I'll tell you what page to find the exemplar we'll look at on. Then we'll look at this slide, and we'll try to have a discussion around how we might score that and why. And then we'll look at the way it was scored in the exemplar package. So there's a little bit of back and forth. Hopefully I won't make you dizzy, and you can ask me to slow down or whatever you need as we go through. I've got many, many pages open on my desktop, so I also ask for your patience. So we'll start. I'll just have to stop share as I go back and forth between my PDFs and my slides. So I'm going to stop share and reshare my exemplar package. So I'm going to be looking at grade 4 numeracy. If I can find it on my desktop here, looks like this one. So I'll just scroll up so we can make sure we're on the same page here. We are grade 4 numeracy, exemplars and rationales. And what I wanted to start with is reading question 1, which is on page 2. And we'll read part A, B, and C. And then we'll go on from there. So I've got it open on my screen for you in case you need to read my version. And if it's easier for you to read your version, just go right ahead. And I'll just give you a few seconds to read each portion here. So that's question 1, part A, B, and C. I see that there's a notification on the chat box, and my apologies. It's hard for me to navigate between the chat and the various documents I have. So I'll pause at certain moments and check in the chat box if that's okay to do that. So I see them there, just notifying you that I can see those chats there, but I'm gonna keep going. So we've read the question A, B, and C, and if you keep scrolling in this document, you'll see that there are possible solutions. We're not going to go over the possible solutions in our work together today, but they are there for you, which if you yourself don't understand the answer, or it doesn't come to you very quickly how you might solve this, it's a really good resource to look at different ways of thinking this out and showing work. For our purposes, we'll just skip that part if that's okay. And then if you're able to switch over to the scoring guide, hopefully you've come with me as I switch screens there. If you are not looking at the FSA numeracy scoring rubric, if someone could turn on their camera and let me know. So here's the rubric. So we read the question, 3 parts. We'll just have a little look here at how this rubric is laid out. It has this handy snapshot here, which is some of the keywords are taken out of this and they were on my slide there. What was on my slide is also in this scoring guide in previous pages. And then we have this broken down into these facets. This rubric has these 3 facets. And I just want to pause here to give you a sense of the difference between 1, 2, 3, and 4. Words like insufficient, emergent, sufficient, and clear understanding are helpful when, when scoring student work. So back to the numeracy exemplars package. Let's go to exemplar 5 on page 19.
Rebecca, sorry, they were asking about where did they can find the package?
Janet sent the package out with the Zoom link. She sent all the package that you need. She also sent it out in emails a couple of days ago. I don't have access to your email, so I can't send you anything right now, but I noticed them myself when I was signing in today with the Zoom link, that they were right in the body of the email that had the Zoom link. So you should find them there. They do require, a download so that you can, but that's where they were.
Yeah, thank you. That was a question in this chat, so just
okay.
So the people can follow up. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So here is exemplar 5. So numeracy 4, question 1, exemplar 5 is what we're looking at today. And we'll read through these answers in part A, B, and C together. And then we'll discuss our thoughts on how we might score this one and just play around with that experience of scoring and looking at the rubric. So I'll give you a minute or so to read as I scroll through in case you don't have your own. These exemplars are from student work for this year. They're captured with the first opening weeks of FSAs. These answers were captured and put into exemplars. There's about 13 exemplars per question. Okay, so there is one exemplar. I'm going to stop share and reshare the keywords slide, exemplar slide, once I find it. Try that. So given that exemplar that we just had a look at, using the keywords, let's see if we can kind of pick a line of best fit using a holistic view. You know, there's 3 questions, so there might be different aspects of that question that fall into one of these categories, and then another portion might fall into something else. If you would like to look at the full rubric, you can look at the full rubric in the scoring guide. That just so that you remember, the page number was page 9 of the scoring guide, if you wanted to go back to that. But let me hear from you. What are your thoughts? If you haven't scrolled ahead to look at what this one was scored in the exemplar package, tell me what your thoughts are and why for this example, which again is exemplar, I just want to make sure, exemplar 5, question 1 in the grade 4 numeracy. What do you think this one should be scored? Since there's only 3 of you, I'm really depending on you to participate. The pressure's on.
I just think this one's a difficult one because the first part of the question is correct, and so is I thought that part C was pretty reasonable as well and explained, but it's part B that is not at all well explained. So is it is it a 2 or 3? I really don't know, because in some ways it's a 3, but then maybe a 2 because of the second part.
Yeah. So let's go to the rubric. I'll stop share my slide and we'll go look at the full rubric. I think this looks like it's the one I want. Nope. I've got so many things open on my desktop. Pardon me, bear with me. I think it's worth taking a look at the slide. Yeah, there we go. Pardon me, not the slide, looking at the rubric. Okay, so that was a good point. There's a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. So we can kind of see there's more flow to this rubric than the simple version, the keyword version. So there was, who was speaking earlier? Sorry, I didn't look to see who it was.
It was me, Tish.
Tish. Oh, I only see a few of you on there. I can't see everyone. That's why. Sorry, Tish. So Tish was saying, a little bit from the 2 column, a little bit from the 3 column. Do you have a sense of a line of best fit? Is there more from the 3 or more from the 2 in your opinion?
I thought there was more from the 3, but if they, with the fact that they didn't do part B was not really done, that's where I'm a little bit in between.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any different interpretation? A different interpretation? Okay, well, let's go back to the numeracy exemplars document and let's go to scoring page 126. And this is how that exemplar 5 was scored. Exemplar 5 received a score of 2. So let's look at their rationale for that. You can read the top, these words here at the top are kind of pulled out of the rubric as evidence for this rationale. So like Tish said, there's a couple of pieces that belong in that column for 3, line of best fit, according to this scoring, has most of them in the column for 2. So they received a score of 2. Any thoughts on that or questions about that? I felt like I didn't find it surprising. It's good practice to kind of see how things are scored and to see how things are kind of taken apart, because it isn't that part 1 is given a score and part 2 is given a score and part 3 is given a score and then they're averaged. It's more like there are elements within their answer for part 1, 2, and 3 that have a reasoning and analyzing, and understanding and solving, and a communicating and representing. Stephanie, did you want to add your thoughts on that one?
I did have a question. So the way I look at it, part A and part C, they did all the steps fully, correct? It's just part B that has any problems. So like if they had done part B the way they've done part A and C, they potentially could have gotten a 4. So by not doing part B, they went all the way down to a 2.
Well, it helps me when I'm looking at these things to look at the kind of the words within these scores. So sufficient understanding, if we wanted to move them into 3 from 2, rather than emergent understanding, it would be sufficient understanding. And if we wanted to move them from sufficient understanding into this 4th column, it would be clear understanding. And so I look at each of these kind of comments within the rubric to see in what way I would have to shift into the next line or the next column. So let's go back to that example, which was page 19. Okay, so here I have this shown. Maybe there's some reasoning that's missing. This could have the word minutes beside it. There could be various other details, I suppose, that someone could show a real clear understanding of what each of these numbers represent. We can also take a look at one that is scored 4 and see the difference in a moment. But scrolling down to B, we saw that there was, I think the wording was a lack of understanding, and certainly in that 3rd facet of the rubric where it is communicating and responding, this lacked some sophistication, which is what you said, Stephanie, pardon me. And in part C, and now I want to go back to the scoring, which is 126. So fresh eyes on the exemplar, and looking again at here, let's look at the rationale, the anecdotal rationale at the top. Reasoning is implied, and there's an emergent understanding of concept and skills insufficient to solve the problem. We agreed about part B that it isn't an appropriate solution. Reasoning or evidence is lacking in some degree. Okay, reasoning to solve the problem is implied in part B. We agreed about that part. Analysis is sufficient in part A. And that was the part with 20 plus 20 plus 20 equals 60. They could make 3 trays, I think was how they worded it. And emergent understanding of concepts and skills insufficient to solve the problem in part B. So then taken and applied to the rubric in the columns, it was that this marker couldn't move over to the 3 in some of these overall areas. Reasoning is implied rather than partially explained. Emergent understanding rather than sufficient understanding. Strategy does not lead to appropriate solution. Rather than is appropriate, but minor errors in execution or calculation. Maybe response communicates a starting solution rather than communicates a solution with simple explanation. It's very subtle, right? It's very, very subtle. So I want to take a look at another, I want to do question 2 and start to like get a feel for these subtleties between, particularly between 2 and 3. So is that okay to move on, or does anyone have any other explorations to do with this particular exemplar? Okay. So let's do question 2, which we'll read on page 46 of the numeracy package. And again, just in case you don't have yours in front of you, I'll scroll through my screen nice and slow so we don't get dizzy, so you can have a read through part A, B, and C. Okay. Now, let's just, so you've read this question, I'll stop share and share my slide so we can just review the key ideas of the rubric. So keywords taken out of the snapshot of the rubric for numeracy, answering that question about the 2 lakes, just as a reminder. Limited, basic, proficient, advanced, evidence is clear, evidence minor inconsistencies, evidence lacking, evidence absent. Okay, I'll stop share and reshare the exemplar package. But I know I've got the right one. There it is. So let's take a look at an exemplar. Let's go to exemplar 5 on page 62. Numeracy 4, question 2, exemplar 5. And I'll scroll through so you can have a look at it if you're not using your own document. And we'll see what we think of this one. So we're looking at the approach, whether it is limited, basic, proficient, or advanced, and we're looking at evidence. Is it absent, lacking, minor inconsistencies, or clear and well presented? Part B. Limited, basic, proficient, or advanced. Evidence is absent, evidence is lacking, evidence contains minor inconsistencies, or evidence is clear and well presented. Pardon me. And part C. Limited, basic, proficient, advanced. Evidence is absent, lacking, contains minor inconsistencies, or clear and well presented. Okay, what are your thoughts? you want to look at the whole rubric. It's in the scoring guide, page 9.
It seems a bit similar to the last example, because the first and the like part A and part C are kind of more, I'd put that more in sort of the 3 range, but this part B is not as clear.
Why not?
Well, it doesn't really explain, like it just shows some addition there. It does, and I kind of see where this learner is going, but it doesn't really explain, like it's with that question, it's possible for Chris to win. But they're not really communicating like why or in which situation Chris might win or might not win.
Okay.
So it's really more in sort of in the 2 area, like they're doing some math, they kind of have the idea of what they're trying to do, but they're really not able to sort of explain it in a clear way.
Okay, so under this facet of reasoning and analyzing, it's sort of between it's implied or it's partially explained. And in the understand and solve, it's sort of an emergent understanding with insufficient, or although insufficient to solve, or is it sufficient with concepts and skills to solve the problem? Strategy chosen, maybe appropriate with minor errors, or strategy chosen contains relevant steps but does not lead. I agree. It's again between these 2. So what it takes is looking at the A and the B and the C and highlighting from within this rubric these portions, and then seeing, okay, well, which has more, from which column 2 or 3 are there more aspects that are scored in that column? Does anyone else have anything to say, their thoughts on this one before we take a look at how this one was scored?
I would say we're going more onto a 3 here, because for me, looking at part B, they've got all the information, except they just didn't put 3 fish down for Jordan.
They
So
did use centimeters.
sorry, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they said Jordan caught 3 fish, so there's only 2 there.
Right.
And so I think that's just sufficient understanding, but just minor errors in execution of this calculation, maybe. That's
Okay.
just my 2 cents.
And okay, well, let's take a look at how this one was scored. We can go to page 131. So the score is 3, and here's the rationale. There's the anecdotal rationale, words sort of chosen from these areas of the rubric. And I'll just scroll down so you can see the whole rubric, but I'm happy to scroll up again if you want to read those. So the 99% validity, right? Like we agreed, it's sort of between the 2 and 3. And I feel like as I set out to mark this one, I wouldn't know right away if it was a 2 or 3. I would have to pick it apart and do the highlighting, just as this scorer has done, to see where do I have most of my highlighting. Even if we take up the snapshot, which might be my last step as a marker, if I'm looking at this, it's quite close. Certain aspects kind of lean towards that 2 column, but overall I can get more in that 3 column when I look at what the student did well. And when I use my professional judgment to kind of say, well, I get where they're going with this. The things that are missing are specifically writing centimeters, and it says 3 and they've given 2, for example. So kind of characterizing where the student was going is our professional judgment, and to use this rubric to kind of guide those choices that we're making about where we think the student was going with their answer. Does anyone have anything to say? Is this a surprise to anyone? Okay. Well, let's look at another challenging one. Let's go in your numeracy exemplar package, let's go and read question 3 on page 83. Slate versus screen. And there's parts A, B, and C. I'll scroll slowly for you to have to get a sense of the question if you're reading from my screen here. I'll just do a quick switch over to the rubric. Those kind of key words that create a difference between those columns. And I'll keep my slide with the kind of keywords rubric on the side there, and we can come back to that. But let's take a look at an exemplar. Let's go to exemplar 5 for question 3, which is on page 100. Numeracy 4, question 3, exemplar 5. And we'll take a look at how this student interpreted this one. So we're looking for limited ability, basic ability, proficient ability, advanced ability. Is the evidence absent? Is it lacking? Does it contain minor inconsistencies? Is evidence clear and well presented? Part B. Limited evidence is absent, basic evidence is lacking, proficient evidence contains minor inconsistencies, advanced, clear and well presented evidence. And part C. Computer's getting slow there. Limited ability, evidence is absent, basic ability, evidence is lacking, proficient with minor inconsistencies, advanced, clear and well presented. What are your thoughts? Come over to the rubric here so you can take a look at it. Anyone bold enough to share their score? Their guess?
I would say 2 for that one, because there's a, let me just try and see the rubric. It's demonstrating a basic ability to view. That's in the snapshot.
Yeah.
Reasoning is definitely implied. Yeah, I would put it as a 2. Emergent understanding.
Okay, anyone else have a different view?
No, I definitely think it's a 2.
Okay. So let's take a look. We'll go back to the exemplars document and we'll go question 3, exemplar 5, scoring page 136. They also scored it as a 2 And let's take a look because I see some highlight in the 3 column. You'll notice with this one, it must have been tricky because there's just 3 3 pieces highlighted, where at the other example there was, you know, different parts that showed up in various areas, you know, a couple of points from one cell of the rubric here. This one's just kind of straightforward. And so because there's 2 that have landed in this column for 2, and you know, basic ability was highlighted and evidence is lacking to some degree, this was the score of 2 was chosen for this one. Any surprises on this one? Yeah. I'm going to stop share for a moment. So you can see the subtlety between particularly those middle 2 columns. It's very subtle, and I find using the keyword rubric, which is in your scoring guide at the top of that document, or they've pulled out keywords for each of the rubrics, which I find very helpful for my quick glance. And when in doubt, I look at the snapshot on the rubric and kind of read through what it says in the snapshot of the rubric, and the words that describe, you know, it's sort of like a professional judgment, which one feels most right, and I kind of lightly highlight that in the snapshot, and then I go through and really dissect where I think the student was going with that and what evidence they have on the page, and I'm highlighting between those 2 columns without judgment beforehand, really just, is this true, is this true, and characterizing between, if my takeaway is very subtle between 2 columns, I'm really just waiting to see where it all plays out in my highlight after the fact. And then if there's still a question, you know, if it's quite equal, then I go back to that snapshot, and if I'm characterizing the student's work, which column is more closely characterizing their work. And again, I get to use my professional judgment and go with the one that's the best fit. Any questions about numeracy? Because in a moment we'll move on to the literacy and get through the 2 themes there. Any final thoughts on numeracy? Okay. I'll share my screen again and take a look. We're back to my slides here. Here, we're switching gears into literacy, where we have 2 themes, genius animals and kindness matters. And there's 3 questions for each theme. So students get to choose a theme and then they answer those 3 questions for that theme. They don't have to choose both themes, but you'll want to know both themes and have this experience today so that you can be marking for either of those choices. So 3 questions for each theme. The first 2 questions are your reading rubric, where the highlight is comprehending and connecting. And question 3 is the writing rubric, where the highlight is create and communicate. And we talked a little bit about what is professional judgment, but it really is, as you've seen with that experience looking through the numeracy, it's about like this looking in the student's work, what are they doing really well? What are the strengths in their answer? And then looking at the areas of stretch or weakness and kind of finding the right column that speaks to those areas of strength and weakness according to the rubric, and then looking at that overall score and making sure that when we're choosing the right highlighted area, that it's not our bias that's informing that choice. It's not because we don't like messy writing or we have a real problem when people mix up their theirs and theirs and theirs, and or their yours and yours. We can let go of some of that bias when we're aware of it, and we can just focus on the quality of the student work and where they were going with that. So let's dive in to the work with the literacy. these for question 1 and 2, the reading rubric, these are the keywords that have been pulled out in the scoring guide. Limited understanding, misreading, verbatim recall, understanding the gist, simplistic, literal interpretation, clear understanding, mostly accurate, in-depth understanding, support is accurate, and insightful. So those are kind of helpful keywords as we're just giving it a first look. So let's go over to this. It's a different document than your numeracy document. It is theme 1 literacy, grade 4. Just make sure I have mine up here. Yes. And I'll stop share for a moment and reshare. Hopefully this doesn't make people dizzy as I go back and forth. I know sometimes it's a little bit can give us headaches if we're going back and forth too quickly. I'll try to be careful. I don't think that shared the right screen, so let's try that again. Not that one. This looks right. There we go. So we want to make sure that we have the right PDF open. It's grade 4 literacy, theme 1, genius animals. And we will turn to the first story, which is on page 2. I think the hope was that everyone would have a chance to read the story before our time today, but just, is there anyone who hasn't read the story? Okay, I'm not hearing anything, so I'm going to assume you've all read the story. Anne-Marie, were you just about to say you haven't read it? You have read it. Okay. Got it. So I'm just going to scroll through in case, just so we can refresh our memory if you read it yesterday or the day before or last week. I'll just give you just a quick refresher. If you do need to read my screen, please let me know and I will happily go much slower for you. But we will scroll through here at somewhat of a slow pace so you can remind yourself what it's about. And we'll stop at page 5 to read question 1. Okay, a lot going on in that story. And so I'll assume that you've all absorbed that in your own time, and that was a good reminder. Question 1. Now, the way that the literacy works and the way that I thought best to proceed was to do each question and look at exemplars for each question. So we'll start with question 1. And we'll take a quick look at the scoring guide, page 6, to see the rubric for the comprehend and connect rubric, the reading response for questions 1 and 2. Let's just get a sense of the words. There's these 2 portions. Let's see if I can get it all on my screen. Not really. Just especially the 2 and 3 seems to be the trickiest differentiation. So let's just take a look at some of those words before we look at an exemplar, and we can refer back to this as well. This word some understanding versus understanding. evident versus clearly evident, and so on. Okay, so again, if we need to come back and refer to this document, I'm happy to switch my screen. So going back to our exemplars package, let's go to page 16 and look at exemplar number 9. Just make sure we're there. Literacy 4, theme 1, question 1, exemplar 9. Okay. Okay. What are your thoughts on this? So we're looking for, I'll just give you the keywords from the rubric. Limited understanding, misreading, verbatim recall would be a 1. A 2, understanding the gist, simplistic support, literal interpretation would be a 2. A 3, clear understanding, support mostly accurate. And a 4, in-depth understanding, support accurate and insightful. Again, those are just the keywords. The rubric is much more fleshed out, but to give you kind of just a sense, what are your thoughts? How should we score this exemplar number 9? No judgment here. We can just go for it. Let's give it our best guess. So does it feel like it is limited understanding, misreading, or verbatim recall? Is it a 1?
I would give it a 3 actually, because I think it's they're able to support their thinking. I would say they are accurate. Sentences are complete and accurate. And there is some supporting evidence.
Yeah, so if I look at the keywords, keywords rubric, the keywords in the 3 column are clear understanding, support mostly accurate. And so that's what you're saying. So let's take a look at how this one was scored. So let's go to page 58 for the scoring. And so these scorers agreed for a score of 3. And they have their evidence is some understanding of the question is evident, generally complete and accurate, insightful inferences, some integration of ideas. And let's just take a look at the whole rubric and see where those highlights lie. So their initial, I don't know, for me, I use a snapshot as my initial kind of score, and then I come back to it. But let's imagine that this scorer also did an initial snapshot look. They were kind of half and half here between the 2 and the 3. So then going through the work and placing it in these smaller portions of the rubric helped them arrive at a 3, because we've got 2 areas that fit into that category or into that column for the 2, and 2 areas that clearly fit into the 3. And then they've got this insightful inferences that swings things into the 4 column, which when we take the line of best fit, the professional judgment of this person said, well, that's a 3, because we've got 1 in the 4, 2 in the 2, 2 in the 3. And I would agree with that. That calculation of using these columns to arrive at a 3. Any other thoughts on this one? Okay. Well, let's swing over to question 2. So there's a different story for question 2 on page 21 of the package. So you can, if you've read it beforehand, you can remind yourself by taking a quick look. This is a shorter story, so I'll scroll through in case you want to remind yourself using my screen what the story was about. There's some teenage movement happening in my kitchen. Hopefully it's not too noisy for you, throw you off if you're reading. Okay, so there's the story. And here we have question 2. And I'll take you back over to the scoring guide and make sure we have comprehend and connect. This is question 2, so that's the correct rubric. And just take a look at some of those words that characterize the difference between the scores. Almost get the whole thing on the screen. Okay. Let's take a look at an exemplar. Let's go to page, in my notes here, let's go to page 28 for question 2, exemplar 5. And we're looking for a score of 4 would be from the keywords rubric: in-depth understanding, support accurate, insightful. A score of 3 would be clear understanding, support mostly accurate. A score of 2 would be understanding the gist, simplistic support, literal interpretation. And a score of 1 would be limited understanding, misreading, verbatim recall. Pardon me. Okay. What are your thoughts on this exemplar? Take you to the scoring guide and you can have a review of that. See where, even if you use the snapshot as your first read. Let's hear from you. What are your thoughts?
It falls into the 2 range for me mostly. Like there's some understanding, but I wouldn't use the word clear. And they do have some details, but doesn't always, support.
Yeah. What about in this connect area?
Yeah, I think that word simplistic in the 2 column,
Okay.
it kind of hits for me. Like there is some interpretation, but it's a little.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. It's simplistic. I think the whole the snapshot for number 2 for 2 would fit it perfectly. simplistic, literal literal interpretation. But yeah.
Okay, well, let's go back to our exemplar PDF and we'll turn to page 64 for the scoring. And it did receive a score of 2, so you're right on the same scoring as the masters, I'm calling them. And so again, just the same words you use: some understanding, some details, lack some details, some integration. And those words, some, align with that number 2 column. In this case, the some integration of ideas is in the 3 column, in that connect area. So in each of these examples, your thoughts have been right on with the scoring professionals here. So let's take a look at, I want to do I'm going to stop share and we'll switch over to question 3, which is the writing, that has the writing rubric. So I'm just going to share my screen again and show you my slide here with the keywords. I did it again. Didn't share the right screen there, pardon me. Too many screens open. So the keywords for the writing is, we've got unorganized, few personal connections, simple language, some organization, some personal connections, simple language, organized, clear connections, language is clear, or for 4, organized, focused, insight, sophisticated language. So let's take a look at question 3. In our package, it's going to be on page we're going to look at read question 3 on page 38. So we want to make sure that we have the theme. So we're in the package for theme 1. We're looking at genius animals, and it's from both of those previous questions. Now the students are asked to use that kind of theme to have a personal connection, some kind of personal written piece. And so let's look at an exemplar. Pardon me, before I show you an exemplar, I want to take you to the scoring guide and show you page 8, because it's a different rubric for the written piece. The personal response has a separate rubric. So I just wanted to give you a little picture of that before we look at the exemplar. It's slightly different than the reading rubric, and it has create and communicate as the main facet here. So just a quick look at that. Yeah, it's really subtle between these 2 columns. So this is where our work is. And we'll look at, for this one, question 3, we'll look at exemplar 11, which is on page 51 of theme 1 document. Page 51. Literacy 4, theme 1, question 3, exemplar 11. As you read, I'll remind you of the keywords from the rubric. Score of 1, ideas are unorganized, few personal connections, and simple language. A score of 2, some organization, some personal connections, generally simple language. score of 3, organized, clear personal connections, and language is clear, and a score of 4, organized, focused, insight, sophisticated language. So what are your thoughts on this exemplar for question 3? And I'll take you over to the scoring guide here, the rubric for this personal writing. What are your thoughts on that exemplar?
There's definitely understanding of the purpose, which is 3, but then I would say there's really just more of the 2 where it's some sense of organization. They are somewhat or unevenly developed. Some personal details and some, so I think it's more the 2.
Okay, any other thoughts? We can take a look at it again.
I think they have some fairly organized thoughts. They just don't have a lot of personal connection. That's the only part I'm struggling with on it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, let's take a look at, for exemplar 11, the scoring. Let's go to page 60. 60, is it clear? So it was scored a 4. So let's find out why. We've got insightful understanding of the text and question, includes detail with relevant elaboration, insightful inferences, interpretation, or pardon me, shows interpretation or insight, and offers reactions and opinions with logical support. Okay, so for those of you, the 2 of you that answer had some comments to share, where you were leaning towards in the column for 2 or 3, what are your thoughts now? Like the parts that have been highlighted here by this scorer, does that resonate with you? Does that align with some of the things you were thinking about?
I don't disagree with that they have on there, but I guess my confusion is how much significance did they want for personal connection? Because it sounds like they're making a big emphasis on it, but then there wasn't any in that one.
Right. So what page was it on? It was page 51. The personal connection that I read is, I thought it was surprising and I learned, which is limited. I mean, there is a personal connection, but it's quite limited. So let's go back to the rubric.
Looking at it again, I do think it has a good sense of voice after reading it over. So I agree with that, but I'm struggling for a 4.
Okay, so let's go back to page 60. It would have been helpful for me to see the snapshot, so let's do that ourselves.
Sorry, Rebecca, I thought we needed to be on the personal response scoring rubric for this. And
Let's make sure I'm looking at the correct. Let's see. I think you caught me on something. Rationale's question 1. Yeah, so I need to, my page was wrong there. Pardon me. The exemplars, page 51, theme 1, exemplar, question 3, exemplar 11. I have the wrong page for checking the exemplar. Please excuse me. Let's go and find the question 3 exemplar 11. Thank you for calling on that one. Sorry for the scrolling again. Question 3. They have a good number of exemplars, which I find very, very helpful. And it can be helpful to have an example of an exemplar that's a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1 in front of you as you're kind of working through your pile, as it were. It can be very helpful, not just to have the rubric there, but to also have samples of each of those scores. Thank you for noticing that. Pardon me. Let's see, now we're looking for exemplar 11, and I'll correct my notes here too. 11, there we go. So a score of 2. So now let's look back. We have this scoring guide here. Let's just read their notes here. Understanding of the purpose, some sense of organization, ideas are somewhat unevenly developed, some sense of voice. Now let's look at the scoring guide 2, okay? So we all identified there was a sense of voice. There was some personal details with those 2 statements that started with I. We all were sort of wondering about this area here. This was a kind of a good experience to have this error so that we could, this doesn't quite fit, but so this is a good experience for us. So how do we feel about this now that we've been on this roller coaster ride with my notes? How do we feel about the score of 2? Are we there, or what are our thoughts?
2 makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
That makes more sense to me, sure.
Yeah, I'm just correcting my notes here. Thank you. Okay, that was a nice roller coaster. I'm going to stop share and we're going to switch to theme 2. We've got just a short time together. So the good part about switching to the next theme is that we don't need to look so closely at the rubric because you're starting to get familiar with that. So we will simply switch. I'll show you the slide to give you a sense of the keywords for question 1 and 2, because we're going to be going back to theme 2, question 1 and 2, and just have a quick look at that. And so I really, again, really appreciate these keywords because it just kind of guides you quickly to just to have like your first impression, and then to do a little bit of dissecting. It's helpful to have these keywords kind of in front of you. And we'll go to the exemplars package for theme 2, and we start on page 2. So it's a separate document than your first theme. We'll start on page 2 with the first story. This theme is kindness matters. And I'll switch screen and share.
Rebecca?
Yeah.
Wait, in my packages, I only had the 1 theme in the math and the numeracy. I don't have the second theme.
For the literacy,
Yeah.
there's just, for numeracy, there's only 1 theme. For literacy, there's 2 themes.
I know in the literacy, I only have the first theme.
Ah.
With printed only, it only had 1 theme.
Oh. Okay, well, I will scroll through mine nice and slowly so you can have a look at it. Yeah, I think Janet and I both got these examples really late, and I passed them on to her, and then she was going to pass them on to you. And I did see an email. There was I saw at least 2 attachments, but I didn't check to see if she had sent out all the attachments. So my apologies if you didn't all receive theme 2, but I can provide it for you here. And you have to do your best to read. You're at your fastest speed, unfortunately. But even without all the details of the story, we can still look at the responses. I feel like we can do that. This story is a little bit longer. If I'm going too fast or slow, please speak up and let me know. Not ideal to have to read it on someone else's screen. My apologies for that. Hopefully that wasn't too fast. I'm conscious of time and I want to make sure that I give you enough time to just have a quick sample of the responses. Question 1 is on page 8. And we had a look at the rubric with theme 1, and we just did a little review of the keywords. So we'll take a look at an exemplar and then we can review the rubric if we need to. So let's go to, hopefully my notes are right for this one, page 18 for theme 2, question 1, exemplar 9. We'll just double check. We got theme 2, question 1, exemplar 9. And as you read, we're looking for a score of 1 would be limited understanding, misreading, verbatim recall. Number 2, understanding the gist, simplistic support, literal interpretation. A 3 would be clear understanding, support mostly accurate. A 4 would be in-depth understanding, support accurate, insightful. Thoughts? You can switch to the scoring guide. Make sure I have the right one. This is personal response. Grade 7. Grade 4, comprehend and connect, question 1 and 2. How would you score this exemplar?
Yes,
Okay.
my first instinct is to go with 1, but then when I read down in the section for 2, definitely is some understanding of the text and maybe minimal relevant elaboration for 2. But then the response is really not complete. But I would maybe err on the side of 2.
Okay.
I had the same thoughts. At first I thought 1, but then reading through again, I kind of moved over to the 2.
Okay. Well, let's go to page 56. And you're both really good at this. You know, it's very subtle. And just like the two of you who commented, there's a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. And this, because there's more in the 2, that's the score that this student received. So that's good intuition on that one. And here's some of the pieces that were pulled out for the rationale of this score. Some understanding, some details, incomplete, lacks evidence, and little integration of information. So let's take a look at the next question. I'm sorry, I'm rushing a little bit. I just want to make sure that you have a chance to see an example of each from theme 2. So let's read, if you have this document for theme 2, let's go to page 23. And the next story is called Painting the Endangered. And this will, the question 2 will follow this written piece. I'll just leave it on my screen for a moment for those of you who need to have a quick read. Okay. Didn't give you a lot of time. Hopefully you got the gist of that story. And question 2 is here. So this is the Comprehend and Connect rubric that we were working with for question 1. So let's take a look on page 34, theme 2, question 2, exemplar 8, page 34. Just to make sure, literacy 4, theme 2, question 2, exemplar 8. So when you read that, which score are you leaning towards?
I'm leaning towards a 3.
So on the keywords rubric, the words under the score of 3 are clear understanding, support, mostly accurate. And let's take a look at how this one was scored. Let's go to page 63. Score of 3. We're getting good at this. So there, if I go back to page 34, there's support, there's some understanding, there's some connection. Drawing from the story. So yeah, score of 3. Any other thoughts on that one? Okay. So we're going to go to question 3. We've got just 5 minutes or less left with our time together. I wanted to give you an opportunity to see question 3, the written response. So we'll take a look at question 3, which is on page 39 of theme 2 document. That's the question there. And we have the personal response rubric here. Just to remind you what some of those keywords for that one. And so in our exemplars package, let's turn for question 3. Let's turn to page, question 3. Let's turn to page 48 for exemplar 8, question 3. Page 48. Make sure we have it right. Theme 2, question 3, exemplar 8. Create and communicate is the rubric facet, and for a score of 1, it's unorganized, few personal connections, simple language. For a score of 2, some organization, some personal connections, generally simple language. For a score of 3, organized, clear personal connections, language is clear. For a score of 4, organized, focused, insight, sophisticated language. What are your initial thoughts on this one?
I think that's a 2. Some organization, some
personal connection.
Personal connection.
The language. Okay. Anybody else think anything different? So if we head to page 69, this was exemplar 8, score of 2. Let's see their reasoning there. So some of your same comments, some sense of organizations, some details. And even the way this is highlighted without the words shows insight is helpful when trying to arrive at a score, trying to find the line of best fit. Just finding what is true for this exemplar, for this student work, is helpful to give a sense of which is a better fit, 2 or 3 in this case. There's a few more details from the rubric scoring of 2. And we made it right to the end of our time. We had a chance to look at each question, at the 2 themes. We raced through it all. We had a happy accident in that we got to show somebody noticed that we were looking at the wrong exemplar, which helped us come back to what we thought originally, which was that it was a 2, not a 4. So that was helpful too. So I didn't leave a lot of time for questions and answers, but any final thoughts as we close off for today?
Rebecca, would we be able to get the theme 2 for the literacy after the fact?
That might be a question for you, Janet. In the documents that you sent on to registrants, they did not receive theme 2 for the literacy.
I don't believe I got a copy of that, but everybody, because you're school-based, in the same portal where you enter your marks, that's where you find the exemplars.
Mhm.
So they're available through your administrative portal in your FSA system.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rebecca. It was helpful.
Thank you for being
Thanks
here
very
and for
much.
participating.
Thank you.